Flicking through these cruise brochures, I'm seeing glamorous destinations, fun-packed onboard activities, good food, comfy cabins, but there's nothing about some of the most important things affecting us as cruise passengers, things I think we should be told and talking about. So I'm going to lift the lid on the issues and topics I think the lines should be talking about and why. If you're new here, welcome aboard. I'm Gary Bembridge, and it's my goal to make it easier and more fun to discover, plan and enjoy unforgettable cruise vacations. Many issues the lines do not draw your attention or talk about up front in their brochures and sales material is the myriad of things we agree to when we book our cruise. When we book a cruise, we agree to their cruise contract and terms. As you will see, this has several areas buried in there that the cruise lines don't really seem keen to talk about as I discuss them through this episode. One issue cruise lines don't really like talking about is security arrangements, crime, and the extent to which they monitor us as guests. The Princess Medallion, the wearable device that you use to open your cabin door, order food and do other tasks, also monitors where we are all around the ship. Based on the string of comments I got on my channel, this gets many passengers in a total tizzy and really uptight about the idea that the line can track and monitor where they are. They wouldn't use it because it's outrageous the cruise ships are tracking them. However, cruise ships are tracking us and have been tracking us all the time. And this only goes to prove how little we as passengers know what's actually happening on board a ship. All over the ship is CCTV. The only place there's no CCTV is in your cabin and in private areas like public restrooms. It has really sophisticated face recognition built in using the photo when you check in. Have you ever wondered, for example, how they know which photographs are yours? If you go to the photo center and use one of the monitors, you'll find all the photographs with you in it show up. It's because they're using that face recognition software. Another use has been contact tracing. So when there's COVID issues on a ship, I've heard how lines like Royal Caribbean, for example, have used it to identify who is in close contact with anybody that tested positive. It also helps them identify who's involved if there's an issue, crime or some kind of incident. In addition to agreeing to be tracked like this, there are other things we've agreed to for security. For example, we agree via the cruise contract that our baggage, our person and our cabin can be searched. And also that we can be confined either in our cabin or even in the brig, that's the prison, on board if the captain decides we should be. Also, we agree that they can disembark us if they decide we've done anything that affects security or are suspected of a crime, again, at the decision of the captain of the ship. Now, I've actually seen that happen. For example, 2 dancers were thrown off the ship when I was on some legs of a Cunard World Cruise who'd been caught shoplifting on land. You may also have seen the Australian family that were thrown off a Carnival ship for causing trouble and fights a couple of years ago. While we may understand why lines are a little bit coy about talking about the levels and how security works, one thing they definitely don't want to talk about in detail is the level of crime on a cruise ship. There's no central global database of crime on cruise ships. However, we do have a sense of the scale of crime that happens, and it's not coming from the cruise lines directly. Since 2010, ships that travel in and out of US ports have to report any serious crime to the FBI, and the US Department of Transport then produces a quarterly report of all of the crime that's happened on ships that are within US waters. Crimes like assault, sexual assault, thefts of over $10,000, homicides, and so on, serious crimes. Looking at those reports, there's usually between 20 to 40 crimes reported per quarter, and the majority of those are actually for sexual assault. Some are crew on crew, some are passenger on passenger, and so on. Now, bear in mind that globally, 29 million people a year cruise, and the US is the biggest area and numbers for cruising by far. So it appears the overall level of crime is quite low, and possibly the CCTV and the tracking helps keep a lid on some of that crime. However, it is hard to know globally how much crime takes place on board cruise ships because the cruise lines are not public about it, and they're definitely not ready to talk about it. So it fuels doubts and fears and concerns that it is higher and it is underreported. Crime overall from the data and anecdotally does appear though to be low, but I think it's a real pity that the cruise lines aren't more upfront on this particular issue. Though many of you may know this as you found out the hard way, I do see first-time cruisers get caught out by this one, as the lines do not draw attention to or make it clear. And that is that they've built in the right to change itineraries before a cruise sails, during a sailing, and to drop ports without having to offer compensation or even often allow you to cancel unless they define it as a significant change. I get contacted often by passengers really upset that a key port that they'd booked a cruise for is dropped or could not be called on. Of course, this can be completely out of the control of the cruise line, like for example when I went on a round the UK trip on Windstar and we couldn't make it into 3 of the ports due to bad weather. It's not something that the lines like to talk about or make that clear, and I think they probably should be a little bit more upfront, particularly for first-time cruisers. I need to talk about one of the most contentious areas in cruising by far. So not surprising the lines do not like to talk about this one, and this is what happens to auto gratuities. Many cruise lines, if they don't include gratuities in the fare, add auto gratuities on board. Now they tell us that it gets shared between the crew, both those that we come in contact with and those behind the scenes. But they don't talk about or publish or share who exactly gets it, nor the amounts collected and shared, making it actually impossible to know what really happens with these gratuities. They just say it all goes to the crew. Now I've spoken to crew on various crew sites on board, and they tell me that they don't believe that they get all of the gratuities. Others say that they do. It's impossible, however, to know because the cruise lines will not give any specific data and don't like to talk about it. This leads, of course, many to believe gratuities are just used actually just to bolster the wages for the crew, enabling the cruise lines to pay less rather than increasing wages above an already good, decent wage paid, so the gratuities become a plus. Something the lines are not keen to talk about in detail, so this adds to the belief that there's a real big issue here. Another area which cruise lines definitely don't have much transparency or make crystal clear is around some of the relationships that they have and the deals that they're getting. Now, some functions on the ship are contracted out, and in the cruise contract, the line will say that they will not accept liability for those contractors' activities. It's not always clear or easy to tell which things on a ship are contracted out. The most common of these, though, tend to be the spa and fitness, the photography center, the shops, and even on some cruise lines, the medical center. You've probably been on cruises with shopping advisors on board who give talks, hand out shopping maps, coupons, and provide kind of personal shopping in the ports. It's not made clear and openly spoken about that the shops themselves have to pay to be recommended, nor do the lines talk much about what the lines then receive in fees to be in the program and the level of commissions they also get from sales by directing passengers there. Studies by reporters, including one I saw recently on the Huffington Post, calculated that the fees are in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then there's commissions on top of that. The lines have also started to buy up popular attractions. For example, Carnival Corporation bought the very popular Skagway, Yukon and White Pass Railway. Some, like Princess and Holland America, they own trains, buses and lodges that are used in pre- and post-cruise trips in Alaska. This kind of integration and directing of passengers to company-owned places or relationships that they receive incentives from is not something that I've certainly seen cruise lines talking openly about, and it's actually played down in some areas by the cruise lines, again leading to some concerns by passengers that there's more to it than meets the eye. Maybe it's not surprising that lines aren't particularly upfront about this next one, but whenever I've been on behind-the-scene tours, which includes the medical center, this gets asked about and passengers definitely want to know, and they want the cruise lines to talk about it more. Cruise lines are surprisingly less keen to talk about it, and this is around how many people actually go missing or die on a cruise ship. Now, the data shows that between 19 to 25 people every year go overboard or go missing on a cruise ship. That's 19 to 25 out of 29 million passengers that cruise every year, and there's about 300,000 crew on ships around the world at any time. Sadly, those that do go overboard unfortunately have chosen to do that rather than have accidentally fallen off the ship. Separate to that, data suggests around 200 people a year die on board a cruise ship, and it's almost entirely of natural causes and mostly elderly passengers, such as the famous broadcaster David Frost, who had a heart attack when he was on a speaking engagement on Cunard's Queen Elizabeth ship. Although the lines are reluctant to discuss this, as I guess it sounds pretty ghoulish, and I guess they fear it has the wrong connotations, ships actually do have a morgue on board and are required under the various maritime laws to carry body bags. It's kind of just sensible. Don't believe any of those kind of crazy stories going around that ships empty out the ice cream store or whatever to store a body if someone unfortunately dies on board. If you ever hear Operation Rising Star over the public address system, that indicates there's been a death on board and triggers various protocols. What is and is not put in the ocean by ships is something that cruise lines don't talk about as much as they should, in my view. Partly as I suspect if they did, it would cause even more debate and more issues for them. But let's take a look at what does and doesn't go into the ocean from cruise ships. Food waste. It does, after it's been ground down into kind of a liquid form. And if the ship is out in international water, that effectively can be released and becomes food for the fishes. Grey water, which is what comes from your basin and your shower and other places like, say, where dishes are washed, that also goes through a treatment process and is allowed to be put into the ocean once it's been through that process. Black water, or as we call it, sewage, is a much more complicated situation. The MARPOL 4 convention, covering all cruise and freight ships, allows raw sewage to be released into the ocean when a ship is over 12 miles from land and cruising at 4 knots. Between 3 and 12 miles, only treated sewage can be released, and under that, no sewage can be released into the ocean at all. So cruise ships could release untreated sewage into the ocean. Now bear in mind, there's something like 300 cruise ships sailing at any point in time. Some of them are extremely large, as we know, carrying many thousands of passengers and crew. That's a lot of sewage that could be going into the ocean. However, the lines have all agreed through CLIA, that's the Global Cruise Line Association, that they will not follow that protocol. And they've all agreed they will only release sewage into the ocean once it's been through a detailed 4-stage treatment, which is to make the waste and the water safe and compatible to be released. So that's what they do. Glass, plastic, paper, tin, that's all sorted and it's prepared for sale to recycling companies, and it's then disembarked in ports. Now, some cruise ships actually incinerate some of the rubbish, but again, they're not allowed to put the ash from that's generated for that incineration into the ocean. It's only allowed to be taken off in port. Ingredients like chemicals that are used, for example, for processing photographs or oils from cooking, those types of ingredients again have to be stored and are only allowed to be disembarked in port. They cannot be put into the ocean. Cruise lines are starting to talk more about what they're doing on the carbon footprint front, such as launching ships that use LNG, liquefied natural gas, hybrid ships, the ability to plug ships into electrical power in ports to kind of cut emissions when they're in port. But there's still a long way to go in this area. And so while the lines talk about it a bit, it's not that much in reality, because I suspect it will just create more and more issues. But I think cruise lines are going to have to start talking about this whole area much more than they do currently. There's a couple of other surprising things the lines don't talk about and do not draw our attention to in the cruise contract that I do want to highlight, as I've seen some of them causing some problems. First of all, cancellation policies. Now, those are in the really small print, but they're really, really strict. After 90 days before your cruise, after final payment, you could lose pretty much all of your money if you have to cancel. It's a really tough policy. Secondly, some of the lines say that they can take photographs and video images of you, and they could even use them in marketing or advertising material without paying you a penny, a cent to use it. But at the same time, some will say that they can stop or restrict you taking photographs or videos on the ships. And I actually know some vloggers that have been stopped filming on a couple of cruise lines. Some even say in their contract that they can require you to take down any images that you've posted on social media or blogs or somewhere else. If you want to know about some things that appear to make no sense on a cruise ship like this, why not watch this video where I start with something that baffled me totally. See you over there.